If you looked at my life, you'd see the American dream on a strict budget. My name is Sarah Miller. I'm 41, and I live in a quiet suburb of Cincinnati, Ohio. I am an aide at a preschool, and my husband, David, manages the receiving dock at a warehouse. We have two kids, Ethan, who is 15 and obsessed with basketball, and Lily, our 12-year-old girl who still leaves small, detailed drawings under my pillow. Our life is filled with carpool lines, PTA meetings, and the constant low hum of financial anxiety that every working American knows well. Our biggest flaw, the thing that kept us up at night, was our health insurance. David's company plan was cheap, but the deductible the part we had to pay before the insurance kicked in was astronomical. It was designed to cover a catastrophic event, but not the slow, grinding reality of chronic illness. And then, chronic illness knocked on our door. Lily had always been a little fragile, but last spring, she started having frightening, recurring fevers. After months of tests, doctors at the Cincinnati Children's Hospital gave us a diagnosis: pulmonary fibrosis, a rare, progressive disease that was scarring her lungs. The diagnosis felt like a wrecking ball hitting our tiny, safe house. The main drug prescribed, Respiria, was Lily's lifeline. The doctor sat us down for the inevitable conversation about cost. The pediatric specialist, Dr. Hayes, told us Respiria is an incredible drug, Sarah. It can halt the progression of the disease and give Lily a near-normal life. But it is new, specialized, and unfortunately, very expensive. David asked her, "How expensive?" "Doctor, we have insurance through my job." She replied to him, "The list price is roughly $5,000 a month. With your high deductible plan, your copay will be $3,500 every 30 days. Forever $3,500. Our mortgage payment was barely $1,400. That amount was our grocery bill for 2 months, our car payment, and all our utilities combined. It was an impossibility. We spent the next 6 weeks trying everything legal. We applied for grants. We set up a GoFundMe page that stalled after $800. And David took on brutal night shifts stocking shelves at a big box store, often sleeping for only 4 hours. But the debt piled up faster than the money came in. Lily's condition, meanwhile, was slowly worsening. She was missing more school, and her drawings under my pillow became sadder, showing little girls trapped behind bars. I was breaking. The pressure of watching my daughter fade while knowing the cure was sitting on a shelf, locked behind a $3,500 price tag, was an absolute torment. The breaking point came at St. Jude's Pharmacy, our local neighborhood pharmacy, where I picked up our normal, non-life-threatening prescriptions. I was talking to Maria Gomez, a pharmacist assistant whom I'd known since high school. We used to share fries in the cafeteria. I was crying, utterly defeated, while trying to buy Lily's cheap anti-nausea medication. I confessed to Maria, "We can't do it, Maria. We're $4,000 behind on the Respiria. David might lose his job." And Lily keeps coughing. I feel like I'm watching her slip away. Maria looked around the pharmacy nervously, then lowered her voice until it was barely a whisper. She said to me, "Sarah, look, I shouldn't be telling you this. This is unethical, maybe illegal, but I have to say something." I asked her, desperate, "Tell me what, Maria? Any advice, anything at all?" She told me, "We have a patient, a client of ours, an elderly widow named Mrs. Eleanor Henderson. She lives in that assisted living community, Oak Ridge. She's 84, quite frail, and forgets things easily." Maria paused, looking over her shoulder again. She continued, "Mrs. Henderson is on Medicare Full, Platinum coverage, because of a complicated pre-existing condition. Her doctor prescribed her Respiria as a preventive measure. even though she doesn't actually need it right now. She picks it up like clockwork every month. It costs her $5. My mind stopped. $3,500 versus $5. I asked her, the words tasting like ash. You mean she's receiving the medication but not using it? It's just sitting there. Maria replied, her voice filled with guilt. It's sitting there. It's paid for by the government. She barely remembers her own name sometimes, let alone what pills she's supposed to take. She has more than a year's supply in her medicine cabinet that she's never opened. Maria quickly added, I can't look the other way, Sarah. I'm leaving this job next week to go back to school. But I wanted you to know, some people get the lifeboat, and they don't even need it. I left the pharmacy in a daze. The truth was a toxic bomb in my hands. The thought of stealing the medication it was a crime. It was a violation of my moral code, everything I taught my own children about right and wrong. But the image of Lily, her pale face, her labored breathing, was a stronger, primal force. My child was dying because of a bureaucracy of deductibles and copays, while a lonely old woman, who didn't even know what day it was, had the cure sitting in a cupboard. That evening, I didn't tell David the dark secret Maria had given me. David was too honest. He would have shut the idea down immediately. This was my burden, my terrible choice. I drove out to the Oak Ridge Assisted Living community. It was a clean, quiet, and slightly sad place. I went in, found the list of residents, and asked the attendant for Mrs. Henderson's room. I stood outside her door, my heart pounding like a drum. I was about to commit a crime, not for profit, but for survival. I was about to create a prescription ghost using a living person's name to save my own daughter. The choice was clear, cold, and utterly terrifying. I stood outside Mrs. Henderson's door, room 108, feeling less like a desperate mother and more like a common thief. The corridor smelled faintly of disinfectant and old flowers. The silence was unnerving. This was the moment I crossed the line between a worried parent and a criminal. I knocked softly. I heard a frail, distant voice say, "Come in, dear. Is that the lovely lady who brings the tea?" I opened the door and found Mrs. Eleanor Henderson sitting in an armchair by the window, wrapped in a thick shawl, looking utterly lost. She was exactly as Maria had described, sweet, confused, and utterly alone. I introduced myself gently. "Hello, Mrs. Henderson. I'm Sarah. I'm a volunteer with the Community Outreach Program. Just checking in on the residents." She smiled, a thin, papery smile. She told me, "Oh, how kind of you, dear. I just wish my Walter was here. He always knew where I put my spectacles." We talked for 20 minutes. I asked about her day, listened to her talk about her late husband, Walter, and helped her find her spectacles. They were on her head. My conscience was screaming at me, but my resolve hardened with every shallow breath Lily had taken earlier that day. This wasn't stealing from an individual. It was exploiting an absurd, heartless system. Finally, I made my move. I asked her casually, "Mrs. Henderson, I notice you have quite a few medications here on your shelf. Do you need any help organizing them? Sometimes the facility staff leaves things in odd places." She replied, "Oh, those silly pills. I think the nice nurse puts them in that little box. I never quite remember which ones I'm supposed to take. They just keep sending them. Bless their hearts." I walked over to the cabinet. There it was, a neat stack of the distinctive blue and white boxes, each clearly labeled with the prescription for Respiria, addressed to Eleanor Henderson. They were unopened, still sealed in their protective pharmacy bags. Enough for several months. My hands shook, but I moved quickly. I took one box and slipped it under my heavy coat, wrapping it in the scarf I carried. The box was light, but the weight of the action was crushing. I told her, my voice sounding strained. Everything looks perfectly organized. Mrs. Henderson, I'll be back next week to check on you. She replied, you are an angel, dear. An absolute angel. I practically ran out of the facility. The stolen medication burning against my skin. The irony of being called an angel while committing a federal crime was almost unbearable. That night, I started Lily on the first dose of the stolen Respira. David saw the box on the counter. He asked me, his eyes wide, Sarah, where did you get this? It's Respira. We couldn't afford this. Did the grant finally come through? I lied too easily. I said to him, yes, David, a private grant from a pharmaceutical foundation. They processed the application quietly. We can't talk about it. They want to protect their anonymity. David hugged me tightly, tears filling his eyes. He whispered in my ear, thank God, Sarah. You saved her. You saved Lily. That hug, that moment of pure relief was the first installment of my moral debt. I was basking in the love and relief of my family, all built on a foundation of theft and a profound lie to my honest husband. Over the next few weeks, Lily started to improve. The cough lessened, her color returned, and she even went back to basketball practice with Ethan. Watching her laugh, watching her run without pausing to catch her breath was worth every sleepless, guilt-ridden night. But the borrowing had to continue. The dosage was fixed. Every month, I had to return to Oak Ridge. The rhythm of my crime became a terrifying routine. I would volunteer at the assisted living community once a week bringing cookies, reading to a few residents, establishing myself as a trustworthy, familiar face. This allowed me to regularly visit Mrs. Henderson without suspicion. I discovered that Mrs. Henderson was truly lonely. Her children lived on the West Coast and rarely visited. She enjoyed my company, and the irony twisted my gut into knots. I was stealing her medicine, but giving her company, was that a trade-off? One afternoon, during a visit, I was startled when a nurse, Brenda, walked in unannounced. Brenda was sharp, focused, and didn't miss much. Brenda said, Mrs. Henderson, you're looking well. Have you been diligent with your medications? Mrs. Henderson happily replied, oh, yes, dear. The lovely Sarah here helps me keep everything tidy. I'm feeling quite right, thank you. Brenda looked at the supply of Respira, which I had carefully maintained to look like a small, unused reserve. She told Mrs. Henderson, well, you certainly have a large supply of that Respira. I'll have to check your usage logs. We don't want any overstocking in case the pharmacy makes an error. My blood ran cold. Usage logs. If the facility or the pharmacy compared the dispensed medication, which was going to Mrs. Henderson, with the usage logs, which would show zero consumption, the alarm would be pulled instantly. I knew my window was closing. Maria, my original lifeline, had already left the pharmacy to go back to school. The new pharmacist wouldn't know me, and if Mrs. Henderson's overstocking was flagged, the Medicare system would investigate for fraud, a federal crime that would ruin not just me, but David and the kids. I had to accelerate my plan to cover my tracks, which meant I needed to find a way to dispose of the old, empty bottles before the pharmacy noticed the discrepancy in inventory. And more critically, I had to stop the monthly delivery to Mrs. Henderson. But how do you cancel a prescription when you aren't the patient? And how do you stop stealing a medication that is still the only thing keeping your daughter alive? The guilt was a constant poison, but the sight of Lily thriving was the antidote. I was trapped between my devotion as a mother and my shattered integrity. The threat posed by Brenda, the meticulous nurse at Oak Ridge, forced my hand. Her casual mention of usage logs made it clear that my arrangement with Mrs. Henderson's ignored prescription was about to be exposed. Medicare, the federal system, would soon flag the massive discrepancy, thousands of dollars of expensive medication dispensed monthly, but zero records of it being administered. That was fraud, plain and simple, and it pointed directly at me. I realized I couldn't just keep stealing. I had to stop the supply without raising an alarm. My first attempt was pathetic. I decided to call St. Jude's Pharmacy. A new pharmacist, whose voice I didn't recognize, answered. I asked him nervously, "Hello. I'm calling on behalf of Mrs. Eleanor Henderson of Oak Ridge. She seems to have a large overstock of her medication, Respiria. Could you please pause the next refill? She doesn't need it right now." He responded with immediate suspicion. "Ma'am, only a licensed nurse, the prescribing physician, or Mrs. Henderson herself can request a hold on a controlled maintenance drug like Respiria. Who exactly are you?" I stammered. I'm a close friend and advocate." He replied, "I'm sorry, but without proper authorization, the refill will proceed on schedule. We have protocols." I hung up, feeling defeated. The system was designed to be rigid, which usually protected patients, but in my case, it was forcing me to commit a deeper crime. My visits to Mrs. Henderson became more painful. I wasn't just stealing her pills. I was desperately trying to engineer a way to legally stop the flow of drugs, so the phantom stock wouldn't incriminate me. One rainy afternoon, I found Mrs. Henderson looking particularly frail. She held my hand, her skin like parchment. She told me, "Sarah, dear, you are such a comfort. My Walter always told me to look out for the helpers. You are my helper." I asked her, my voice thick with guilt, "Mrs. Henderson, I need to ask you something very important. Do you remember seeing your doctor recently? They might be calling you about your medications." She looked confused. She said, "My doctor? Oh, I think he said I was doing wonderfully. But I forget, dear. I forget so much these days." It hit me then. I had to tell her the truth, or at least a carefully crafted version of it. I couldn't manipulate an old woman who genuinely trusted me. I told her gently, "Mrs. Henderson, listen closely. That blue and white medicine, the Respiria, it's very, very important. But you have too much. It is dangerous to have so much extra medicine. I need your help to tell the nurse or the facility manager that you want them to stop the deliveries." For a few months, I spent nearly an hour repeating the instructions simply and clearly, trying to imprint it into her fragmented memory. The next day, I received a frantic call from David. He sounded furious. He demanded, "Sarah, what is going on with the utility bill?" I saw a $500 transfer to a private account, and it was labeled Lena P. Consulting. Who is Lena? And why are we paying a consultant when we're supposed to be saving for Lily's medication? I froze. David had seen the bank statement. I had completely forgotten to hide the payment I made to Lena Petrova, the cyber analyst, during the deep fake crisis from the previous story. My lies were starting to overlap and entangle my life. I quickly fabricated a response. I said to him, That's a specialist, David. A specialist I found through the Grant Foundation. They require a fee for their time reviewing Lily's file to ensure the grant money keeps flowing. It was a one-time thing. I'm sorry I didn't tell you. I was trying to handle it so you wouldn't worry. He told me, clearly not believing me. Stop saying you're trying to handle things. We're drowning, Sarah. And I feel like I'm the only one trying to keep my head above water. Where is this Grant Foundation money coming from, exactly? Show me the paperwork. I couldn't show him the paperwork because it didn't exist. Our argument escalated. He shouted, I found another $200 withdrawal labeled Oak Ridge community fees. You don't volunteer for money. Sarah, are you gambling? Are you hiding something huge from me? I realized my voluntary work at Oak Ridge, which I had started to look less suspicious, had created yet another mysterious withdrawal. I fought back. I am doing everything I can to save our daughter, David. I'm sorry if my methods aren't perfectly transparent, but your salary and the insurance deductibles aren't enough. I am tired of living paycheck to paycheck, watching our daughter struggle while the system protects pharmaceutical profits. The fight ended with David slamming the bedroom door and sleeping on the couch. The tension was suffocating. I was protecting Lily's life, but destroying my marriage and my integrity simultaneously. The next morning, I got a text message from a blocked number. The anonymous text read, "The pharmacy has flagged a discrepancy with the Henderson prescription. Usage logs show 0 administration. Your window is closed. Stop immediately, or the police will be called. It was Brenda, the nurse. She must have seen the logs and decided to send a single final warning before alerting the authorities. Panic seized me. I immediately called Lena Petrova. No, not Lena. I called Maria. I had to know if the situation could be reversed. I called Maria. She answered hesitantly. Sarah, I told you I can't help you anymore. I left St. Jude's. I said to her, Maria, listen, they flagged the Respiria. They know the usage is 0. You gave me the idea. Now you have to help me fix the paperwork before they press charges. She told me firmly, I only gave you the information, Sarah. What you did with it is on you. I quit because I didn't want to deal with the moral ambiguity of that pharmacy anymore. You need to find a way to get Lily legal, sustained access, or you need to stop. Maria hung up. I was alone. I drove back to Oak Ridge one last time. I found Mrs. Henderson sitting in the garden. I asked her urgently, Mrs. Henderson, did you talk to the nurses? Did you tell them to stop the medicine? She looked at me, a genuine spark of concern in her old eyes. She said, oh, dear Sarah, the medicine. I was trying to remember. I told the nice lady with the red hair Brenda that I needed to save them for my lovely friend, Sarah, because her daughter is so sick. My heart shattered. In her confusion, she hadn't requested they stop the prescription. She had inadvertently revealed that she was hoarding the drug for me. Mrs. Henderson, the victim of my crime, had just tried to cover for her angel. The moment Mrs. Henderson told me she was saving the medicine for me, the narrative shifted entirely. I wasn't just stealing to save my daughter. I was now implicated in a deliberate conspiracy with a vulnerable elderly woman. My crime had escalated from desperate survival to exploitation. I left Oak Ridge knowing that my time was up. I received a second text message from the blocked number from Nurse Brenda. The second anonymous text read, I have contacted the pharmacy's corporate office. The discrepancy is too large. You have 24 hours to explain yourself to the facility manager and the pharmacy, or I will file a report with Medicare Fraud Investigation. 20-4 hours. That meant facing federal charges, losing my job, and most devastatingly, having Lily taken away from me if I was incarcerated. I went home and found David on the couch, still cold and distant. I knew I couldn't keep the secret anymore. The lie had become a greater threat than the truth. I sat next to him and said, my voice barely a whisper, David, I have to tell you everything. There was no grant foundation. There was no anonymous donor. David slowly put down the remote control. He said to me, his voice dangerously calm, I knew it. I knew you were lying. Where is the money going, Sarah? Did you buy some crazy investment thing online? I confessed to him. The money wasn't going out. The medicine was coming in, illegally, for Lily. I then recounted the entire ugly truth, Maria's tip, Mrs. Henderson's excess supply, the high deductible that made me desperate. and the horrifying monthly visits to steal the life-saving medication. I told him about Nurse Brenda's ultimatum and Mrs. Henderson's confused attempt to cover for me. When I finished, the silence in the room was absolute. David didn't scream. He didn't shout. He just buried his face in his hands. He finally looked up at me, his eyes red and full of a painful confusion. He asked me, "You put us, your family, at risk of federal prison for a drug that the insurance company should have covered in the first place. Sarah, you broke the law. You took advantage of an old woman. How could you?" I answered him, tears streaming down my face. "I am a mother, David. I watched our daughter suffocate while you were looking for an extra shift. The system put a price tag on her life, and I found a workaround. I chose Lily over integrity. I would do it again," he stated, his voice heavy with resignation. "The system didn't give you permission to commit a crime, Sarah. It gave you a choice. And now you have to clean this up. You have to tell the truth and take the consequences." That night, we sat together, not as husband and wife, but as co-conspirators planning my surrender. My greatest burden wasn't the fear of prison. It was the debt I owed Mrs. Henderson. I hadn't just stolen her pills. I had leveraged her loneliness. The next morning, the deadline looming, I drove back to Oak Ridge. I didn't go to see Mrs. Henderson. I went straight to the facility manager, Mr. Peterson. I walked into his office and said, "Mr. Peterson, I am Sarah Miller. I need to report a crime and massive insurance fraud concerning Mrs. Eleanor Henderson's Respira prescription." Mr. Peterson immediately called Brenda, the nurse. Brenda's face was stone when she walked in. I looked at Brenda and said, "I am the one who was taking the medication. I did it because my daughter, Lily, has pulmonary fibrosis, and we couldn't afford the $3,500 copay." I confessed everything, leaving out Mrs. Henderson's attempted cover-up to protect her. I explained that I acted alone and was ready to face the legal consequences. Mr. Peterson and Brenda listened in silence. Brenda, the rigid gatekeeper, was the first to speak. She told Mr. Peterson, "Sir, Mrs. Henderson is fine. She's stable. She was hoarding the medication, but her usage logs reflect zero consumption. The facility is not liable." Then, Mr. Peterson looked at me, a father himself, and saw not a criminal, but a desperate woman. He said to me slowly, "Mrs. Miller, what you did is deeply unethical and potentially criminal. But Nurse Brenda flagged this as a pharmacy error due to overstocking, which is a common issue with Medicare patients who forget to call in. We will take the excess supply back, log it as an inventory correction, and officially cease her prescription under a patient request for temporary pause." I asked him, stunned, You won't call the police or Medicare fraud?" He replied, "We will file a mandatory report with the pharmacy about the missing inventory, but we will not press charges. We don't want the paperwork headache of a federal fraud case tied to our facility, especially one involving a sympathetic figure like Mrs. Henderson and your daughter. Consider this a final warning from the moral police, Mrs. Miller. But you must never return to this facility." I walked out of that office a free woman, but emotionally devastated. I had confessed everything, ready to lose it all, and the system had simply decided I wasn't worth the administrative hassle. The injustice that saved me was the same injustice that had almost ruined me. I drove straight to St. Jude's Pharmacy. I spoke to the new pharmacist and paid them the full $3,500 that I owed for the last box of Respira, the one I had taken just weeks before. I used the last of our emergency fund. I wrote a note to Mrs. Henderson and left it with the pharmacist. "Thank you for the time you gave me. I will never forget your kindness. I am paying for your generosity." When I arrived home, David was waiting for me. I told him everything. He said to me, "You escaped jail, Sarah." But we didn't escape the truth. The lie nearly destroyed us. We spent months in therapy, not for Lily's illness, but for the moral betrayal that almost tore our family apart. Lily continued the Respiria treatment, paid for by endless sacrifices, second jobs, and a new, cheaper insurance plan with a less catastrophic deductible. I never returned to Oak Ridge, but a month later, I received a small, slightly smudged envelope in the mail. It had no return address. Inside was a hand-drawn picture, colored in with faint crayon, showing an angel giving a small, blue box to a sick child. Written at the bottom in shaky handwriting were the words, "For the kind angel who helped my little one. Love, Eleanor Henderson." I realized my crime, born of desperation, had unexpectedly created a strange, unbreakable bond of kindness with the woman I had exploited. The guilt remained, a ghost that lived in my chest, but it was now tempered by the knowledge that, in the darkest moment, I had found an act of accidental grace. I never forgot the lesson. In America, sometimes the highest love a mother can give is breaking the law for her child's health. And the true cost of that expensive little blue box was not $3,500. It was my peace of mind and my husband's trust. I still have the angel drawing. It reminds me every day of the bedrock of my survival and the cost of my desperation.